just in case, and that will also be here in this room, this very room. Okay, and so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jessie Galligan, the director of Pella Historical Museums, and she will introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Jessie. Well, thank you so much, Carol, and thank you to all of you for being here. We had no idea what kind of turnout to expect with it being the week of Tulip Time, but what better way to celebrate Tulip Time and the founding of Pella than with a talk like this about Pella's founder and his family. So I was joking with somebody, I'm in my getting stuff done clothes today. You all look really lovely, but please excuse the last minute running around that I've been doing. But yes, thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to the library for partnering with us on this to make it possible. A while back, I received, I can't even tell you how long ago, an email from Dr. Carol Hoeksema about this crazy idea of translating a book into English, this Dutch book that, I maybe heard about but hadn't really become super familiar with. All about the founding of Pella, and specifically around Pella's founder, Dominee Hendrik Pieter Schulte. As someone who loves to read novels and doesn't vibe with nonfiction as much, I was really excited about this because it's something that reads like a novel, but based very much on fact. So when Dr. Hoeksema reached out, I was, yes, absolutely, let's make this happen. And then I was privileged to meet MichielvanDiggelen and hear about his vision and what he had created and his idea to make it available to us English speakers and readers. And what a delightful partnership. So excited to introduce him tonight. So please join me in welcoming author MichielvanDiggelen.
I dreamed about this, being in Pella, telling people about my book. And I'm very excited to be here now, you understand. Hi everyone. And first of all, I want to thank the people who invited me to do this lecture. And thank you for the warm welcome you gave me already. My name is MichielvanDiggelen. It's hard to pronounce, Gouda, Gouda, that kind of stuff. I live in Zeist, and that's in the middle of our country, the Netherlands. And I'm a retired economics and history teacher, and I have a wife who's sitting in front, of course, and 3 grown children. I was born in Genderen, and the village where Hendrik Pieter Schulte was a minister in 1833 till 1835, only 1 year and a half. I studied history in Amsterdam, and at the end of my studies, I wrote a final thesis on the secession of 1834 from the Dutch Reformed Church. Schulte was one of the leaders of the secession, and I read his books. I read his sermons, I read his magazine, The Reformation, his letters, and all that. All from and about Schulte. We say Schulte, again, Schulte, you say Schulte, all right. In the Netherlands and later in the USA. 10 years ago, I started to write a historical novel about him. I dived again into the sources and started to write. In 2018, I finished volume 1 about his life in the Netherlands. In 2022, I finished the second volume about his life in the USA. In 2025, 2 months ago, the translation of both books, made by Carol Hoeksema, was published in 1 volume in Pella, Iowa. That's where we're here. I would like to tell something about Schulte's life, illustrated by some passages from the historical novel. And some of you have been reading already the novel. That's no point. At the end of my speech, I will tell something about the way I have been working in order to write the novel. And I'll tell you about my vision of this colorful person. First of all, I want to show some facts about his life, and afterwards a map of the Netherlands. Some facts about his life. Maybe you know them already, but then you can rehearse them. 1805, he was born in Amsterdam. At 1821, when he was 16 years old, his father died. 1827, his mother and brother died, so he became an orphan. In 1829, he started the study of theology in Leiden. That's between Amsterdam and The Hague. I'll show you it on the map. In 1832, he married for the first time, and it was with Sarah Maria Brandt. A year later, he became a minister in Genderen and Doeveren. 1834, there was a secession from the Dutch Reformed Church, so he took only 1 year and a half to go out of the church. In 1937, he was minister of the afgescheiden gemeente in Utrecht. In 1944, his wife died, and he is a widower with 3 little girls. When you write a novel, you will see that those girls play a very important role in his life. They mock a little bit with him and the like. 1845, he married to Maria Krantz. I will tell you something about that woman. She was very special. 1847, and we had a landverhuizing, the emigration to the USA. And that's why we're here, of course. 1855 starts his own church after suspension. So he became 8 years after he arrived here, he became himself suspended from the people who were with him. 1856 was a campaign for the Democrats in Michigan. They were into Grand Rapids and Holland, Kalamazoo. 1860, he was the delegate on the Republican convention in Chicago. So in 4 years' time, he changed his mind. 1868, he died in Pella. Now, yeah. Yes, yeah, there he is. So that's the Netherlands. You know, we've been driving through Iowa today, and you see those big distances over here. We don't have those big distances, you know. Holland is 1/4 of Iowa, and there live 18 million people, and here there live 3 million people. And well, we're overcrowded, you know. Amsterdam, that's where he was born. Take a look. Genderen and Doeveren, he was minister for the first time over there, and that's only 65 miles. Oh, someone's talking. The Hague, it's about 40 miles. Utrecht, he lived very long in Utrecht, at 30 miles. It's all very near. You could walk it if you have good feet. Well, that's something about the map. Heinz Scholte wasn't meant to be a preacher. His father owned a sugar box factory in Amsterdam on the Lauriergracht. Yeah, there it is. This is the Lauriergracht. You recognize the beautiful houses. It's 1855 over here. There's no picture of the house of his father's, but it gives an impression, of course. And Hein learned how to make those boxes. When his father died in 1821, Hein was 16 years old, and he became the manager of the factory. When his younger brother Andries and his mother died in 1827, he sold the factory and took the path that led to the pulpit. Heinz Scholte wasn't very religious and God-fearing as a boy. He was a rash boy who liked the girls. But when he was around 20 years old, he had a burnout. You know, that in that times they already had burnouts. But they didn't call it like that. The years of discretion started. He read poetry and cried tears about his life and future. He was troubling himself about matters of life and death. I'll read a passage from my novel where he is talking to his girlfriend. Everything brings me to tears. I have thin skin. My inner self is touched over and over, like salt poured into a wound. I can't find enough strength within myself to withstand the pain. Nature is beautiful. You are wonderful. The weather couldn't be better, but it seems as if it's not enough. I am missing an inner compass. My heart is like an ocean, which is constantly churned up by the wind, and I can only go along with it. That is why I get tired and overworked so quickly. My heart has no peace, because I don't know where I have to go. In a letter to the theologian Kohlbrugge, he writes, "The work at the factory often distresses me. It deprives me of the room and the time I need for contemplation." Then he attends a meeting in Amsterdam with a German-American preacher. A German-American preacher. And Hein is very impressed by him, because he was from German descent, you know. His grandfather came from Germany. It was the incentive to leave the sugar business. He sold the factory and started to study. Firstly in Amsterdam, and from 1829 on, theology in Leiden. In Leiden, he gathers a couple of younger friends around him, called the Club of Scholte. One of them is Van Raalte, and in the Gospel, Heinz finds an answer to his questions of life and death. Within a couple of years, he is the pastor in two small villages in the Netherlands, Doeveren and Genderen. Genderen happens to be my birthplace. Within a couple of months, he is already quarreling with the church boss. At first, within a couple of months. And he was right, you know. It was so bureaucratic. But this was the Church of Genderen, with a beautiful tower, before it was destroyed in the Second World War by the English. But they tried to win against the Germans, but they shut everything down, of course. Within a couple of months, he is already quarreling with the church boards, I said, and he was a rebel. He follows his own convictions and wants to make the congregation into a community of believers who are truly convinced of the truth of the Bible. Because he doesn't want to keep the modern rules of the board of the church, he is suspended, and that's why he secedes with nearly all the members of the congregation from the Dutch Reformed Church. A difficult period starts. He preaches in the surroundings, and many other believers follow him. Standing on a farm cart, he sometimes preaches for an audience of 1,000 people, until the soldiers scatter the audience. He gets many fines, but that doesn't bother him, because he is a rich man. He is financially independent. He inherited a lot of money from his parents. Scholte's secession was followed by some other preachers, for example by Van Raalte. They tried to work together, but that wasn't easy. They were all autonomous people who had their own opinions about all kinds of religious matters. They tried to work together, but they failed. In due course, Scholte became a loner in the group of seceders. He had his own monthly magazine, The Reformation, the Reformatie, we say, where he wrote about all kinds of religious, political and judicial matters. Around 1840, he lived in Utrecht, in the center of the Netherlands, in a very big house. You see this house, it's the grey one in the center, and you say, well, it's a nice house, but behind the house there was a church, because it was not allowed for Scholte to preach in a church that was visible from the street. So if it belonged to the old Catholic Church before Scholte bought it. So it is very ironic, you know. He preached there every Sunday, but the group was not very large. My novel starts here in this house, where his first wife died in January 1844. He climbs his horse and goes riding through the environment of Utrecht. That's the first page of the book. And Hein is very sad and doesn't know what to do. 1845 was the start of a big crisis in Europe. You call it the potato famine. The main ingredient of the meal of most Europeans were potatoes. I don't know how it is here, if you still eat them, but...
Oh yes.
Oh yes? Well, we do too. Maybe most of the time in fries, you know. When we have a famine again, we just eat fries. When the blight broke out, there were no more potatoes and many people starved from hunger. Many people were jobless and were looking for alternative ways of living. For example, in a different country. They called for emigration as a way to escape poverty and death. Among the seceders, this call was heard too. The seceders not only longed for a new way of making their living, but also longed for freedom of religion. At first, Scholte did not listen to the calls. He thought the time hadn't come yet to leave the Kingdom of the Netherlands. But in the spring of 1846, he became convinced that emigration was needed. He had a couple of reasons. Firstly, many people asked him to be their Moses. Secondly, Scholte became more and more convinced that he was becoming redundant. His appeal to thousands of Dutch believers was gone. It passed away. Thirdly, he didn't have trust anymore in the Dutch government. He was very fond of the oranges, not only the oranges, you know, the king, but they let him down. Fourthly, he longed for freedom of religion. The moment he was convinced that emigration was the only way, he saw it as a mission that God laid upon him. At first, and not many people know that, he thought of emigration to Java in the Dutch East Indies. So you could have been living in the Dutch East, in Indonesia. Imagine that, you know. Hot. It's hot here, but I think it will be hotter there. But when the Dutch government gave him no permission, he went to the Minister of Colonization, but they said, no, you shouldn't go there because it's not good for the balance of religion. Because the people who are from the Islam, they call them Mohammedans, so what do you say here?
Muslims.
Muslims, right, that's the right word. They shouldn't be very happy if there were 1,000 people from Holland. Yes, it's very strange. And he gave them no permission to settle down over there, and he chose for America. He founded the Vereniging voor Landverhuizing, Association for Emigration, and around 800 people became members, paid the fee for the trip overseas and for the trip overland through the USA. A passage from a sermon of Scholte he held for the Association of Emigration. Just like the Israelites were enslaved against their will in the land of Goshen, so we have become enslaved in the land where we as believers can no longer remain. God has removed his hand from the Netherlands, gives us the opportunity to establish his kingdom elsewhere, in freedom, without oppression, in a land in which taxes don't grab bread out of the mouths of hard-working people, where there's space and freedom to profess one's faith openly, according to God's word. And I'm delighted that you have obeyed the call to consult with each other about the purpose, direction, and nature of the upcoming move. Because only if we are in agreement can the colony be successful. Remember that. Someone who tries to survive on their own shall fall prey to homesickness and poverty. In June 1845, Hein married Maria Kranz, German name. Maria Kranz was 15 years younger than he was. I'll show a picture of her. Oh, that way. It's, yeah, there she is. Pretty girl. She was 15 years younger than he was. He was 40, she was 25. They fell deeply in love. I read a passage from a love letter from Hein to Maria. Dear Maria, you are the woman I think about every day, from early morning until late at night. As soon as I am awake, your lovely face appears before me, and I spring refreshed from my bed. The last thing I think about before I go to sleep is you. You are, as the Song of Solomon says, beautiful, and you are unblemished. You are the most beautiful of women. You have enchanted me. Your beauty has touched me, and I can live no longer without you. We are quite different. You are much more worldly than I am. You play the piano and attend concerts. But when you said this afternoon that you will not let me down, I knew that you were the one with whom I want to go forward and share my life with. The only thing that makes me hesitate is the realization that perhaps I'm asking too much. Are you prepared to raise my daughters with me? Do you have the patience to support them on their life's path? The position of a dominee's wife, and especially of dominee Scholte's wife, is thorny and full of valleys and pits. Life with someone like me requires much of you. You would always be the wife of the man who belongs to that little church which hides behind the 18th century premises on Nieuwegracht. Our life often takes place in private, and I'm often away, traveling to brothers and sisters who need my assistance. If you would become my wife, you would need to set your own life to the side and become my helpmeet. But I hope that it won't stop you from saying yes to my proposal. God has brought us together. He has led you and me to each other. During the first meeting in the stagecoach, that's in the book, I knew that you were destined for me. God's providence reaches further than our dreams. Now I dream of you. God be trusted and praised, and want this dream to be carried on in marriage, so that you will be my wife forever. If you will be my bride, if you want to be with me from now on, then you have only to send me back a little note with the word
Yes.
yes. And yes, it was. They were deeply in love, but alas, Maria refused to leave the Netherlands. In the novel you can read several disputes between the two. And Maria was as stubborn as Scholte was. An example. Only in the evening does he speak to his wife. She stayed in bed the entire day. She was pregnant, you know. When he walks into the bedroom, candle in hand, he sees her blue eyes light up for a bit. She's awake. How are you, dear? Maria turns her head and says, with her face averted, I have heard that you incited the people to leave the Netherlands. From whom did you hear that? From my brother and my mother. Incited? Is that what they say? Yes, just like Moses and Abraham, you feel placed at the head of a great exodus and a great crossing. Yes, it feels like that indeed, but it is not inciting, it is obediently following the Lord. I can do nothing else after all that has happened. You could do something else, but you won't. Have you hit your head? Your future is more important than mine, or your children's, or our unborn child's. No, it's about the future for all of us, Maria. We have a job to do. The Lord is leading us there. But do you have to herd the sheep yourself? If you take no action, we stay here. Do you want that? Do you want to disappoint all the people who have no future because you are thinking about your own hide? about your own well-being and because you are afraid of the great journey. So you are not afraid then? I am afraid, but the Lord will make me strong when it is needed. Give me some of your faith and give me your trust. I'm just scared. After long and heated disputes, he persuaded her and promised her a beautiful house and garden and piano in America. After a difficult time, her first child, Hendrik Peter, died within 3 weeks after his birth. She decided at last to go with him and his 3 daughters to America, accompanied by her sister. He arranges the trip for 800 or even more people, Bruce knows the exact amount, and leaves the Netherlands. Now we'll come to the second part of this was the first part of the book. Of course, I only take a few examples, but just a line. And now we come to the second part. The second part starts on board of the hybrid steamboat and sailing ship Caledonia on its way to Boston. Oh, again, yeah. Oh, this one. Yeah, this one. You see, it's a boat with sails and a boat with a pipe for the steam. So when there was no wind, they could go. So this trip was much quicker than only by sailings. He went with his wife and 3 daughters and the sister of his wife by this hybrid ship, like we have a hybrid, in nowadays. And the other people who went with him, the other 800, went on 4 boats only by sailing. So it took 2 months, and this was only 3-4 weeks. They arrived in Boston, and the sailing ships arrived in Baltimore. And Schulte went from Boston to Baltimore to meet his followers. The trip overland to St. Louis took them almost 2 months. Lois Smith, she is here, held a very good lecture 7 years ago here in Pella about the trip overland. Thank you, Lois, for that. So I could write in my novel about the trip. The trip overland was as bad, or maybe worse, than the trip overseas. I read a passage. It's in Pittsburgh. I show the. Every time I do that the wrong way. Just. No, there he is. Yeah, maybe you can do it. Yeah. You see Pittsburgh over there. They went by train down there, and then they went on the Ohio River, Cincinnati, Louisville, St. Louis, and there they stayed for a couple of weeks. Well, I'll tell you about it. But in Pittsburgh they go on board of a wheeler to St. Louis. Hay bales, chests of sugar, baskets of vegetables, stools, farm equipment, boxes of fruit, enormous trunks of clothing, crates of bottles and cages of birds and rabbits, sacks of flour and corn are stacked, waiting to be brought on board. The waiting travelers are milling around the closed gangplank. Hein, Maria, Huberdina, and the girls look at the anthill from their carriage. "Do we have to get on the boat too?" asks Saartje, the oldest girl, anxiously. "Yes, or would you rather swim?" says Maria with irritation. They get out. On a platform in front of the gangplank is a man with a megaphone. "What's he saying? What's he saying?" asks Mietje. That's another girl. "We need to get a little closer, then I'll be able to understand him," answers Hein. The 6 of them shove in close so that Hein can follow what the man is saying. He says that the people must wait until all the cargo and baggage are on board. Then Jan Seinhorst, he was someone from Noordloos, walks up to them. "Do you know what he is saying?" asks the skipper from Noordloos. "We have to wait to board until all the cargo and baggage is off the dock," Hein shouts to him. "Then we'll be shown to our quarters." "Be quiet," says a pale blonde man next to him in German. "I can't hear the guy." Hein explains to him in German what is going on. The man is still upset and passes the news on to his wife and children. Once all the cargo is on board, the people crowd forward, narrowing as they get closer to the gangplank. The man with the megaphone determines who gets on first. Hein is in luck. The Sculptor group is the first to go up. The people in front of them make way reluctantly. The rainfall is steadily lightening up. Everyone is happy to be on board. Below decks, there's a lot of cursing as it appears that there are not enough bunks. Some folks will have to sleep on top of or next to their luggage. "Now, Domine, this is going too far with trying to save money," says someone from Gorinchem, the city in Holland, who Hein doesn't recognize immediately, for whom a cabin or bunk isn't available. "You're dry and will be able to keep an eye on your belongings," Hein says defensively. "But don't you have your own luxury cabin then?" "Don't worry about it, Domine. We're fine here," says a woman in traditional costume and wooden shoes, sitting on a huge square wooden box with her legs stretched out in front of her. Now you have to read the rest yourself. After a long trip, the group assembled in St. Louis. From his rapidly growing city, Scholte went with a couple of scouts, we say in Dutch verspieders, like the scouts who went with Joshua to explore the land Canaan, to Iowa. When he found a nice place with the help of the Baptist minister Moses Post, he bought out the American pioneers who had already settled over there. You were allowed to start a new farm on newly won territory, even if you didn't own the land. These early settlers went through as soon as someone wanted to buy them out. You had to be very careful buying people out. If the settlers got wind that their land was wanted, prices would go up. So Scholte had to act very quickly. I found a very small piece of paper in the Scholte papers that was written by John B. Hamilton, a pioneer in this area, who sold his land to Scholte for the price of $150. In very bad English, he writes that he sells his land near the Des Moines River to Mr. Sculptor, because, well, they didn't know how to pronounce his name, and he said Sculte, and they understood Sculptor, because if it was American, they would say Sculpty, you know? So I think that's the reason why. After the buyout, Scholte and the explorers who went with them returned to St. Louis to tell that they bought enough land to build a city and make themselves a living. Not all of the people who went overseas with him went to the prairie. Some 400 to 500 people went to the newly bought land, which Scholte called Pella. A very emotional moment, and it was emotional for me too, for the new community, is the moment in September 1847 when the men in Pella swear allegiance to the Constitution of the United States. I didn't recognize, I didn't know that, but they had to say, well, we don't follow anymore the Dutch king. We swear allegiance to the Constitution of the United States. And Scholte wants his people to become real Americans, you know. That's why he tries to speak English as soon as possible. Within a year, he writes his letters and sermons in English. The passage in the novel. Hein climbs up on a stump, and explains that in a few minutes, Mr. Babbitt, the clerk, will read out sentences in English which they must repeat. That's the oath to the Constitution. We already gave our names to him on Wednesday. Now the only thing we have to do, conclude the ceremony after he is finished speaking, is to say in Dutch, "So help me God." The people murmur, "Yes," and do it. And then Babbitt stands on the stump. He waits until it is quiet, and then asks them if they would raise their right hands in the air. "It is my intention," says Babbitt with a clear, loud voice. The men repeat after him, virtually unintelligibly, Iets meer tussen. They didn't know what they said, I think. To become a citizen of the United States. To become a citizen of the United States. And after the oath was said, it is intensely quiet. The men know that they are expected to say something in Dutch. Zo waarlijk helpen mij God. The town in Pella grew rapidly, and it still grows. Sculte had megalomaniac ideas about the city. Megalomaniac. Difficult word for me. I practiced a lot at home. Now you got the internet, you know. That they speak it out in 3-4 ways, but I chose the first one. But that's not important anymore. He had bought a large part of the land himself and built a very big house in the center. You know it, of course. Yeah. He held all kinds of positions, for example, Justice of the Peace and School Superintendent. He was also an entrepreneur, like you say that, who opened all kinds of companies, and he still was a preacher in the church. He wanted to make Pella the capital of Iowa. Yes. He also wanted to make the Des Moines River navigable. Didn't work. And he would like to build a wooden road to Keokuk and build a railway station. And a wooden road that looks very peculiar to us, but they had already a wooden road from Kalamazoo to Grand Rapids. So, but these cities were much older than Pella was, of course. Over time, the Pellans started to complain. He didn't preach 2 times every Sunday. He was too busy with his own business and forgot his flock. He didn't finalize the financial settlement of the trip to the USA and of the land that he bought and sold to the people. Because of all the complaints, he had a burnout for a couple of months. So he was forbidden to preach for some time. After reconciliation, it was settled, but the name that was given to him by his adversaries is significant. He was called the Pope of Pella. He had a finger in every pot. In Holland we say, hij had overal een vinger in de pap. So you have a finger in the pot and we have a finger in the porridge. Which is the same finger. And he didn't avoid confrontations. No, he didn't. His flock became smaller and smaller, and after another quarrel, he left the church and built his own. That was 1855. So you know, you all know this church, of course. He also had some good friends in Pella. His old friend Laurens van Bergijk, who was the sexton in Utrecht. And they met one another every week in the barbershop in Pella, from Sticht. His aristocratic friend Bousquet and his nephew Dr. Roelofs. They helped him through hard times. In the late 50s, he became very active as a publisher of his own weekly, the Pella Gazette. And you know, he wrote it in English. In it weekly he could write about his religious, political, social opinions. He wrote about Europe, for example, the Crimean War, how actual can you be? And about the coming of Christ, about the economic crisis, about his political ideas, which evolved from Whig to Democratic and finally to Republican. He was very much against the Prohibition Act, a big deal at that time. Sculte thought that people were able enough to decide for themselves if they wanted to use alcohol or not. A passage from the book where he is attending a gathering with someone who fights for prohibition. His name is Levi. How do you say that? Levi? Okay, Levi Leland, alias Peter Pilgrim. From the book. A week later, Hein is walking in the direction of the building where Levi Leland, under the alias Peter Pilgrim, will speak. Edwin Grant, his son-in-law Benjamin Keebles, and the American Jacob Welch walk with him there. It takes a while to get inside. Pilgrim is popular. When after a lot of searching they find 4 free chairs. Pilgrim comes in and walks to the podium. He's the propagandist for the Iowa Temperance Society. He's a red-headed man and he's wearing a long brown cloak. Pilgrim opens with a smear towards the Pella Gazette. On the way here, I came across 2 drunkards in the streets of Pella. And it's not even dark yet. Alcohol must be totally forbidden, and the new temperance law in Iowa is a step in the right direction. The Pella Gazette, Pilgrim looks in Hein's direction, loves a drinker. Whoever is against the new law promotes the use of alcohol. It must stop here. He puts 2 fingers up his nose and freely blows it next to the lectern. You mustn't support such a newspaper. Withdraw your advertising. Then this paper can no longer promote its drunken talk. Part of the public claps and the bigger section boos loudly. When Pilgrim sits down, he wipes the sweat of his brow with a handkerchief. Then Hein, I call him Hein, Hendrik, tells his story. He emphasizes his words by gesticulating to the audience with his burning pipe. I don't smoke. You are all God-fearing people. You know the Bible from cover to cover as well as I do. I challenge you to find a text which commands total abstinence. He looks around and no one says anything. Even Pilgrim is silent. Hein takes a pull on his pipe and lets the puffs of smoke slip out of his mouth while talking. I think that excessive use of alcohol isn't good, and I want to call on you to have moderation in all things, in use of coffee and tobacco too. Don't destroy your life, but enjoy your time with a cup of coffee and pipe and a glass of wine. Wine contains substances that are very healthy for a person. Perhaps Dr. Nuss, he was the doctor, can agree with that. Dr. Nuss? A young man stands up and asserts that the moderate use of alcohol is good for the circulation. I am against the drinking establishment, says Hein, and drink a glass at home, but don't visit a bar or a saloon. And Pilgrim! You yourself drink too! The rough voice comes out from the back of the room. It's not someone from Pella. You drank in Oskaloosa out of a mug. When you were done, it looked like there had been alcohol in it. I smelled it myself. The audience starts to jeer. Traitor! Hypocrite! Pilgrim stands up. That's a lie, I tell you! Since I was 40, I haven't drunk a drop more. But also not a drop less. Everyone laughs. Oh yeah, you did. In the 1815s, Heinz Colte became an active politician. In 1856, for example, he made a trip to Michigan to make the Dutch minds ready to vote Democratic. But 4 years later, he had changed his political opinions. He became convinced that the new states like Kansas shouldn't be slave-holding states. Kansas was bleeding at that moment, that was the expression. Alas, the people in Pella couldn't follow him anymore. They stayed Democratic, while Colte favored the Republicans. In 1860, he met the chosen President Lincoln in Springfield. I imagined the meeting between the wise man Lincoln and Heinz Colte in the meeting house of that town, where the painter Thomas Hicks made a portrait of him. And old Abe says to him, politics is persuasion, but not only that. As politicians, you try to take others along with you. It's very easy to put people off, but to involve them in your cause and thereby exercise influence is the most difficult. I learn that better every day. I don't want to tie myself to one person, one club or one faction, but will work hard for everyone. I want fairness and justice for everyone. Hein nods. He knows only too well how hard it is to keep people satisfied. When you leave, I'll just take a look at the people who flocked here, from far and wide sometimes, and then I'll dedicate myself to the piles of letters in which people express their fears and hopes. I rebut the gossip, false reports, accusations, allegations and small talk, and have little time for relaxing. But I believe that I have been called by the Almighty to take this task upon myself, preserving the Union. At all costs, asks Schulte. No, if the South chooses to secede, I will try with everything in me to prevent it. When Heinz says his goodbyes and leaves the room, he looks back once more at Lincoln, who is staring into the distance with sad eyes, and as if he sees something he fears. We all know how this ended. The Civil War. Heinz supported Lincoln with all his might. When Lincoln was assassinated, Heinz draped the black piers of cloth around the pulpit of his church in Pella and mourned for many days. Heinz Schulte died in 1868. He spent his last years thinking about the coming of Christ and the kingdom of God, which was in his opinion near. He wrote his ideas in the Toekomst, the future, the magazine that was published by Henry Hospers, who was instrumental in the development and creation of Orange City. Maybe you've heard of him. Henry was 17 years old in 1847 when he traveled with Schulte to Pella. They had many quarrels, but in the end they agreed on things that were important for the both of them. The novel ends with the following. In everything, Heine has strived for perfection, not because he is without sin, but because the Lord invited him to do so. As the years went by, he realized that he doesn't have to kick against everything like an ox, but that it's better to walk ahead under his leading toward the kingdom that he will establish. Maria puts a mustard plaster on his chest to lessen the feeling of suffocation. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit, are the last words he mutters. He closes his eyes and sees clear images of the long journey he made from the Netherlands to America and to the Iowa prairies to Pella, as if it were someone else's journey. His journey is over. Yes, folks, I wanted to write a book of a man of flesh and blood. A man with many qualities and many defects. No theological treatise or tract, no story of a saint or a heretic. So I wrote extensively about his ideas, quarrels and personal relations, about his ideals and fears, his greatness and stubbornness. I wanted to know why he did the things he did, why he seceded from the Dutch Reformed Church, why he left Europe, why he quarreled so much with friends and foes, why he did achieve so much, and why he alienated so much with friends and foes. No? I'm sorry. Why he... Oh, I hear something. So much, and why he alienated so many people from him. That's why the perspective in this novel lies with Heinz Schulte. To show him as he was. The novel is full with dialogues, to show what's at stake for him and for his adversaries. I used all the available sources from and about him. He wrote many books and sermons. There are a lot of sources concerning his work in the Dutch Reformed Church and in the Church of Pella, minutes, official letters, declarations. He wrote many letters. I read all kinds of letters from persons who were connected to him. Personal letters tell a lot of hidden feelings, opinions and preferences. But there's another category of sources that I like very much. Sources that show a lot about someone's personal world, which are not written by the person itself. They show small facts about the habits of a person. Small facts bring color to the story. I searched in the Sculptor papers in Pella and found remarkable things. For example, this one. In the Sculptor papers, which are in Central College in Pella, I found a bill for H.P. Sculpey, written, sculptor, you see there, written by Alexander Ho, owner of a dry goods store in Keokuk. On the bill were mentioned gallons of olive oil and some big bottles of Madeira, cognac and Bordeaux. Not very important, you think. Oh, he wasn't a drinker, he drank once in a while a glass of wine. But it gives a lot of information about the drinking habits of Schulte, and it sheds light on Schulte's resistance to the temperance activity in Iowa in the 1850s. You know, when the Temperance Act was there, only one doctor was allowed to sell alcohol for medical reasons, of course. And guess what? Who became the doctor who was allowed to sell alcohol? It was Dr. Keebles, his son-in-law. Very important was for me, for example, the inventory of his house in the Netherlands and the catalogue of the books he owned when he left the Netherlands. So I found out that he owned several volumes of poetry of the French poet de Lamartine. He was a very romantic young man, and he still was very romantic when he wrote to his wife Maria, a name which he mentioned as a young man, de Lamartine, in a letter to the theologian. I could also imagine how the house in Utrecht was furnished and what he possessed. Yeah, writing a novel on Heinz Schulte is using all these different sources to give an impression of the man. And the imagination does the rest. Not a limitless imagination, but imagination inspired by the facts and kept in check by knowledge of the historical circumstances and habits. Schulte was independent, but he also longed for a community of saints. The attributes of striving for perfection, realizing a community, and desiring personal freedom not only reinforced one another, but were also often in conflict. It was very difficult for Schulte to say sorry to human beings. He was confident and almost too sure of his interpretation of the gospel. He was dramatic, creative, enthusiastic, stubborn, and far ahead of the others, not rational or pragmatic. There was too much at stake: eternal death or eternal life. Schulte was a real Exodus man, not afraid of new beginnings. He was utterly convinced of his beliefs, and being financially independent, he was free to think and believe and do whatever he wanted. And as he thought, the Bible told him. But he was very sincere in that. He could afford to start all over again whenever he believed it was necessary, or when he was simply forced to do so. In this novel, I have tried to understand this octopus with many arms. It's up to you to decide if I succeeded. Thank you very much. Well, Bruce, it's up to you now. Thank you. Nice job.
All right, can you hear me okay? Good. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces here, and thank you for coming tonight. So Michiel is a tough act to follow, but let's give him another round of applause. And I might note that 100% of the proceeds from the book go to the Pella Historical Museum, so Michiel does not get a penny from it. In fact, you came to the U.S. on your own dime, right? So. And not only that, the translator of the book, Carol Hoeksma, I'm proud to say, is my first cousin, also translated the book totally for free, which was a monumental undertaking. She's here somewhere. And just a little bit of context, we gave this program last week a couple times. We were in Calvin, at Calvin in Grand Rapids on Friday, and then in Holland on Saturday. And so I gave a few remarks with that, and I kind of tied in a little bit how Henry Schulte and Domini Van Rolte, who founded Holland, Michigan, were contemporaries. And so my comments and remarks are lead a little bit in that direction. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Bruce Borchi, lifelong resident of Pella. I'm retired now, Central College graduate. And my passion is researching and sharing Pella's history. And so with that, I'm just going to launch into my remarks. They're fairly brief. But today, if you ask the average person in Pella about Schulte or the founding of Pella, many would simply reply that Schulte was a Dutch minister who founded the town. And they might add that the Dutch came to America for religious freedom, but beyond that, most would be hard-pressed to offer more. And that's exactly what makes Michiel's book so valuable. It helps document and brings to life the history behind Pella, its founder, and its founding. His research gives us a contemporary look at conditions both in the Netherlands and in frontier America. Today I want to add some context to Domini Schulte and his founding of Pella, and briefly compare it with Domini Van Rolte and his founding of Holland, Michigan. Schulte and Van Rolte were contemporaries who had formed a close friendship during their time together at Leiden Seminary in the early 1830s. Years later, when emigration became inevitable, both planned to depart for America at around the same time. However, as Michiel mentioned, the death of Schulte's newborn son delayed Schulte's group's journey. But even so, the settlements of Holland and Pella were founded just 6 months apart. The onset of winter, combined with depleted funds, forced Van Rolte to settle in heavily wooded western Michigan. This location actually offered several benefits to his group. His immigrants were primarily from eastern Netherlands and were as accustomed to woodworking as they were to farming. The undeveloped and inexpensive land in remote western Michigan appealed to them. But Schulte's followers were relatively better off financially, and being from west central Netherlands, they were more oriented towards agriculture. Schulte reasoned that farmers wouldn't want to spend time and effort clearing dense forests before they could farm. As Schulte wrote, "I had learned and lived long enough to realize that for the farmers, tree stumps are unpleasant obstacles, and the value of timber decreases markedly when everything is woods and woods." So, Van Rolte settled in western Michigan, and Schulte in central Iowa. Both locations suited the immigrants under their respective leaders. Broadly speaking, Van Rolte came to establish a Dutch colony in America, hoping to keep its nationality, culture, language, and religion largely intact. Schulte, on the other hand, came with the idea that he was leaving the Netherlands behind, including the Dutch Reformed Church, and that his followers would become independent Americans. Van Rolte quickly joined the Reformed Church in America. Schulte declined to join, and instead the Pella colonists set up an independent church called the Christian Church of Pella. It had no denominational ties, no official pastor, and the entire male congregation served as its consistory. Schulte was the primary, though not the only, teaching elder. The Christian Church remained the primary congregation in Pella for 7 years. But in 1854, a dispute arose. The original flat mat of Pella included a lot marked as Church Square. Schulte, who owned the land, felt that it could be better used for business purposes. He then sold the lot, intending to offer alternate ground for the church. When news of the sale spread, many in the church were incensed, and a lawsuit followed. Schulte was then prohibited from preaching, but he insisted that he had done nothing wrong. Eventually, the case reached the Iowa Supreme Court, which ruled in Schulte's favor. But it resulted in a rather bitter split and a turning point for the community. Schulte left to build his own church, and many worshipers followed him. The remaining congregation was left largely leaderless and adrift. Sensing that denominational support would be valuable, they appealed to the Michigan classis of the RCA for help. In 1856, none other than Domini van Rolte was dispatched to Pella to assess the situation. Later that year, the Protestant Dutch Reformed Church of Pella was founded, formed from a majority of the remaining Christian church members. Forming a congregation was the easy part. Finding a minister, not so much. It proved to be a difficult task that ultimately took over 3 years. Though Van Rolte indicated that he would not accept a call, the new church called him anyway, and he refused. Undaunted, they tried again. Although tempted, his response remained the same. They reached out to multiple ministers in the Netherlands, but again with no luck. Finally, they called Van Rolte's son-in-law, Reverend P.J. Ogle. Like the others, he also declined. In desperation, a small delegation traveled to Michigan and finally convinced both the classis and Reverend Ogle. At last, Reverend Ogle accepted, and with joy and celebration, he was installed in early 1860. And even Schulte approved of Ogle. Pella biographer Comer van Sticht wrote, Domini Schulte had often spoken, saying that Domini Ogle, when it came to preaching, was indeed a jewel. And that's high praise from Schulte, who, even according to his severest critics, was a mighty orator with great gifts. But after only 3 years, Reverend Ogle was forced to leave Pella due to ill health. And once again, the pulpit remained vacant, again for 3 years. But what about Schulte's church? And that's the church you see here. He continued to lead it until his death in 1868, just days short of his 63rd birthday. Most accounts say that his congregation disbanded shortly thereafter, but recent research shows otherwise. In 1870, his followers joined the RCA as the Fourth Reformed Church of Pella. A decade later, they switched and joined the Holland Presbyterian denomination, only to return to the RCA again in 1894, and again known as the Fourth Reformed Church. The next year, while the church was struggling and without a pastor, a majority of the congregation left to form the Second Christian Reformed Church. It was led by a newly arrived, charismatic preaching elder named Ryer Vanderkieft. Today, this congregation is known as Cornerstone Church. The remaining Fourth Reformed Church congregation slowly dwindled, and in 1909, it disbanded. For a time, the dilapidated church building served as a skating rink, and finally, it was sold and dismantled in 1916, and the lumber reused to build 2 houses on the site. And so I have to give a quick little aside. This is essentially the end of my comments, but where this church stood, a lot of people are not familiar with its original location, was at 705 West 1st. So it was about a half a block north of where Van Dyke Dubin Funeral Home is today. And just this week, the Pella Preservation Trust had a sign installed in front of the houses because the lumber from the church was used to build those 2 houses that are now on that site. So if you get along West 1st Street, 705 West 1st, there's a little sign that has a picture of the church on there and gives just a brief description of the church. So that's my plug for the Pella Preservation Trust. So born of vision, tested by trials, and shaped by change, Schulte's dream lives on. These stories tell us where we began and help shape who we are. Thank you for letting me share a piece of Pella's past with you. And if you want the full story, read Michiel's excellent book. Thank you for your time. And now we'd be happy to take some questions if there's any questions. And Michiel, I think, would be happy to autograph your book in a little bit. So I'll hand the mic back to you. Maybe we can pass it back and forth if it's necessary.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, Val?
I was also very touched by the men taking the oath to be American citizens. I mean, that happened a month after they got here. There was another reason for that, and that's because there were elections coming up in Marion County. And Schulte wanted his people in running for office so that they could make some of their own decisions. So even though they didn't speak any English, that was kind of an ulterior motive. And I've always wondered about the men that were there. When they took the oath of office, did that also then give their wives and children citizenship? You never hear about the women or the kids.
Lois.
They did not become citizens then. What they did was say that they were no longer citizens, no longer subjects of the King of the Netherlands. It took 5 years to become a citizen, and we now, the Historical Museum has a copy of the letter from the judge of the district court that gives Schulte his citizenship, and it was 5 years after he arrived here. So they gave up their Dutch citizenship. They did not become U.S. citizens for 5 years.
So they were kind of citizenless for 5 years.
So the Iowa legislature passed a specific exception for them so that they could do school board elections, township elections, those kinds of things. They wanted to be able to govern themselves.
Right.
Thank you. Other questions? Is everything so clear? Or you want coffee?
Were there
I'm wondering if there were many journals for you to use as sources, like personal diaries.
Not so many personal diaries, no. But there were a lot of letters, for example, from the Bousquet family and from the Kiebel family about the Civil War, for example. And Lois helped me a lot with finding those letters. And Schulte didn't have a diary himself, unfortunately, of course. But, well, I used all kind of letters in the Netherlands. And there was once a man who went to Pella in 1984, and he has written down all the letters that were here already, so I could read them in Dutch already. So that was very nice. Other questions?
I have a question. What happened, do you know what ended up with Maria?
Well, 2 years after Hein died, she married a man who was 24, 30 years younger than she was, so she was still very attractive. And, well, she has stayed in the same house all the years with this new man, and they didn't have children anymore, of course, because she was already 50 years by then. But, well, that's all I know. I didn't search on the whole story of Maria further on. Other questions? No?
Michiel?
Oh, sorry.
Just wondering if the extended families then were motivated, or did they get his religion and believe in his religion, the ones that were back in the Netherlands? Did the extended family come later?
His family. You mean,
The other members that came over in the first wave, did they agree with his teaching, decide to come over based on that, or just maybe relatives?
Maria stayed. You mean Maria and the other relatives? Well, he didn't have father or mother or brother or anything like that. He was an orphan. So
Her sister came.
yeah, her sister came, and she has lived a couple of years here in Pella. Then she went back with her husband, who was a Dutch man, to St. Louis. And but what further on happened, I don't know. No. But I know that she lived a couple of years, but she quarreled a lot with her husband, and they lived in a house with Scotty, so that gives a lot of annoyance, of course. But after a couple of years, she went to St. Louis, because he was a lawyer and he could earn more money over there. Are there any other questions? Yeah?
When was your first visit to Pella?
In 1984.
Okay. What was it like for you to see his home and to kind of see the last part of this, the second volume, as it were? What's it mean to you to be able to see this in person?
Well, it meant a lot, of course, because I am from the village where he was a reverend, and I wrote a final thesis in my studies about the church where he stayed during 1833 and 1834. So everything is very exciting, because when I am in the Netherlands, I can only think of things that are here. And like you think about things that are there, maybe, and that you do a lot. I heard a lot of people talking about their families and the like, and it's just for me something like a family over here. I've got a very big family in the Netherlands, but I always feel very much like family. Yes, you feel like family to me, because I know a lot about Scotty. So when I saw the house, it was quite emotional to me, but now I'm used to it. Christ, I don't cry for Bella anymore. Yes.
About the home in Utrecht.
Yeah.
What's going on there now? Do people live there? Is it apartments?
Offices.
Offices?
Yeah, the church is broken down. And when he left Holland, he sold it for 18,000 guilders, and he bought it for 11,000 guilders. So he made a big profit, but from the profit from the selling of the house, some people who didn't have money could go to Pella. So some people ask me, well, he was a very rich man and he was becoming richer and richer in Pella, but he always chose a fair price. When he bought the land over here, he had he used a fair price. But you ask what happened to the house? Well, it's still in use as an office, and it's a beautiful garden behind it. I've been in there. And who went with me? Yeah, you did, Val. Yeah, and but it's a nice story. There was a church that was behind the house, and you could go into the house from two sides, from the back side and from the front. And it was not allowed at first to have a church meeting there, and it was only allowed for 20 people to go in. So the officer of the city was standing, or a soldier was standing and counting how many people came in. But then the people came from the other side too. Yeah, I don't know if it's historical, but you can still see the small porch that the people went through. It's still there. If you want to visit Utrecht, just call me. I show you. Yeah, for free. I'm not a Dutchman. Sorry.
I said I tried to figure out which house it was when I was there, but I had no idea really. I didn't know. So next.
Just call me.
I'll call you.
Other people? Yeah?
You had mentioned that he made a lot of money when he came here, but he always sold fairly. I was under the understanding that he sold the land to the colonists for exactly what he paid for it.
Yeah.
Is that not right?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's right.
And well, but for some blocks he sold, and there was some wood with it, and he added something about because he had to pay for the woods himself too. So he, how do you call it, Bruce? He bought it by his own money because the immigration, how do you call it, immigration office? No.
Oh, the land office.
The land office, yeah. They no.
Nope.
Wat is
Landverhuizersorganisatie.
de
Immigration Association.
Association, yeah. Didn't have enough money, so he paid a lot of money, a lot of land from his own purse, you know. And but it was a bit difficult in the beginning because the land office wasn't giving the deeds, so he couldn't give them to the parents who bought for the land. And the same it was with the financial situation from the trip. It took too long, so the people in Palau got very anxious that he did wrong things. But Professor Swearinga from Calvin, he wrote an essay in the 60s already, and he found out that there was no malversation. Is that the right word? Yeah? Well, it's a bit old word maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah? Malversation, yeah? You know that word? There was no fraud.
Yeah, I didn't pick it.
Yeah? That's better. Questions for Bruce maybe, yeah?
Well, what is his legacy in the Netherlands? Do people know about him still?
No.
Maybe because of where you lived.
No. I wrote a novel in the Netherlands and only a few people are interested in it. I get very good recensies.
reviews.
I got very good reviews, yes. But, well, it's just a niche, you know. That's what it is. And I think it's a good book. That's no problem. And we get a lot of reviews, but people don't buy it, you know. But you do. Yeah.
We've heard that the immigrants who came over don't always have such a good reputation for those who do know about them in the Netherlands, that they were troublemakers and they left in good riddance. Is that your perception?
No. No. They had good reasons because they were fined so many times because they just wanted to go to church on their own, and they want to go to their own church. But they were only allowed to when they said to the Dutch government, we don't want to belong to the old Reformed Church, and we don't want to use the old name. So when they said goodbye to everything, to all the possessions of the church and everything, then it was allowed. But it was 5 years after the secession. Yeah. So, no, I don't agree. I think they got good reasons. And Schulte wrote a book when he left the Netherlands. It's called Nieuwjaarsgeschenk. It's a gift of New Year, and I always compare it. And I think maybe it's very strange to say, but it looks a bit like a book of Karl Marx. He's trying to understand what's really going on in the Netherlands, and he's much more than but he's more than a reverend, He has a conception of society, and that's why he wanted to leave the Netherlands too. He didn't believe. Bruce, you know a lot more about that. You said about last time that Schulte was seeing that the middle class was going down. Could you say something about it?
Yeah, today we kind of give the story that they came for religious freedom, which is partly true, but by the time they left the Netherlands, things had improved a lot, and they were actually allowed to have their own churches and their own essentially denomination. But there were a lot of other issues that were going on at that time. After the war with Belgium, taxes had gone up tremendously, and the middle class was essentially disappearing. So they came for economic freedom. Young farmers, there was no farmland for sale, and if there ever would be any, they couldn't afford to buy it. So they knew if they came to America, they could buy land. The government was selling land for $1.25 an acre. So that was a big part of their coming. They also came for freedom in how they wanted to teach their schools, because in the Netherlands, the government pretty much ran the school system, and they wanted to run the schools the way they wanted to. And then, like Michiel alluded to, also the potato famine was a big part of it. So there were really kind of four reasons that rolled into their coming to the U.S.
We looked up and it said that Schulte bought Central College from the Baptists. Is that a true statement?
No.
They found that on Google.
No. Facebook? No, sorry. No, he was sure there should be a college over here, but he needed the money, and he met some Baptists here that were very good guys. And he was friends with the Baptist persons here in Pella that were staying here. And the Baptist conference in the environment here, they came to look here for the land, and they made the college not only a Baptist, but it was they worked together with Schulte, with everything. And so he didn't sell anything, but he gave the land for it, and he paid a lot of money for it. And the people which came with him from the Netherlands, they didn't like it because it was not only a Christian Reformed church, it was also a Baptist, college, but it was a Baptist, also a Baptist college. So that was, but he didn't sell anything or buy anything. He gave a lot of money because he thought it was necessary for Pella to have an own college. That was the point. Yes?
The college was Baptist until 1916. And at that point, the Baptists wanted to pull out, and it was in financial trouble. So it was the first Reformed church in Pella that were behind the purchase of the campus from the Baptists.
All right. Thank you. I didn't know that. No.
So yeah, Schulte did not buy the college from the Baptist. Schulte was involved with his son-in-law and also with Dudok Bisquet, another immigrant here, in convincing the Baptists to locate the college here. They'd considered several other locations around the state, and because Schulte offered them so much land, not only to locate the college on, but also land that they could sell and use the proceeds from that sale to help fund the college. And I thought that Central was founded in 1853, so 6 years after Pella was founded, and his son-in-law, Benjamin Keebles, who married his oldest daughter, came in 1852, and he was in fact a Baptist himself, and I've often wondered if he didn't have a lot of influence on Schulte in convincing him to try and locate the Baptist church here, or college here. Because prior to that, there was no Baptist church in Pella. They met in a farmhouse about, 3 or 4 miles south of Pella. But prior to there being Central College, there was no Baptist church in Pella. So it was really kind of a big leap. In fact, there were no church buildings. Essentially, Pella had a combination church, school, meeting house. But other than that, so sorry, maybe more than you wanted to know.
Don't want any more?
I have a question about the picture of his home in Utrecht.
Yeah.
under the street, there were doors and windows.
Yeah, cellars. Cellars.
Ja, er zit een gracht in.
There's a graft.
Kanaal.
Canal. It's in front of it's the new gracht. It's the new canal, and there underneath you have a cellars. And then nowadays there. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Carol. Yeah, and it's new gracht. It's new canal. And so there is water in front of it, and you can go on up to the water, and there are cellars under the house. Nowadays, most of them are restaurants and for the young people. There's a picture. So, yeah. You see, your water is here. If you don't see the water, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Did Maria ever get to go back? Did she have brothers and sisters and family back in Holland? Did she ever get to go back and visit them, or did she never get to see them again?
2 times they tried that Scholte. Maria would like that Scholte would become an ambassador in Berlin and in the Netherlands, but he was not how do you call it, chosen for that position. But she wanted to leave, to go back to see her mother and her brother, because they were still there. But well, they couldn't go because Scholte didn't get a job, you know. Yeah. And they were very disappointed about it. And if he was chosen as an ambassador in the Netherlands, he would have returned 10 years before he died. So he. Everything clear now? It's a bit difficult for me to answer a question because it's very difficult to speak English for me, you know. So, but I try.
Thank you both for sharing your knowledge with us. And there's so much knowledge in this room too. Thank you all for sharing your stories as well. I hope this inspires you too. If you haven't been to the Scholte House Museum in a while, to come check it out. We'll be open 9 to 6 during tulip time if you have a chance to pop over. Otherwise, we're open 1 to 4. It's Monday through Saturday, and it's truly quite a treasure that we have this house with a lot of original artifacts and furniture and items like that. It's rare, I think, for a community to have that. So, and there's lots of volunteers that I see out in the crowd too that help us over at the
And
house.
we love more.
And we would love more volunteers. So if you want to volunteer, please. Carol?
To be there both Thursday and Friday mornings from I think 9 till 12.
So if you missed that, the Vandiggelens will be at the Scholte House volunteering / selling their books from 9 to noon on Thursday and Friday.
Yeah.
And rumor has it they'll be in Dutch costume for the first time in their lives.
And I heard, Jesse, that they're riding a float.
And there's also a rumor that they're riding a float in Dutch costume. So cheer really loudly when you see them. Again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you, Dr. Hoeksema, for your translation. Thank you for this gift to Pella Historical Museums, truly. So grateful. The money that is going towards this book will go right back into operations for the museum, making sure the Scholte House stays well cared for. So please go grab your book if you haven't already. If you forgot your cash today, it's in the gift shop, so you can get it there anytime. And thank you. Enjoy your tulip time.